when we understood, Terra was really a turning point for us when we understood that the ambition of this mission and the need to collect and analyze data from on the ground local sources meant sovereignty of data, meant sensitivities around intelligence, and there was no way that this could be a for-profit business. And so through the Terra process, we understood this is meant to be a not-for-profit, this is meant to be open source, this is meant to be a planetary intelligence system that we bring to the planet, but is in fact created by the people of the planet, because this is all about crowdsourcing data. So Terra was really, really important. And we've sent pretty much everybody who joins us, we send through Terra, because it's a learning process that you desperately need. You know, you need access to the network, you need the broad-based intelligence and learning that comes with it. And many of the people who've joined us since, I saw Jennifer Anderson is on the call as well. I haven't seen too many other names, but have come from Terra. And so, you know, anytime Terra people want to gain some experience, we will take you. We will take you. It's the best source of fantastic, brilliant, passionate people for us. There's no question. Yeah.
Wow, cool. That's great. That's why I realized there are several Terra fellows actually working at FPI as well. That's why there's this mutual connection actually.
Yeah, and
that's good to know.
Enthusiastic for more.
Cool. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Yeah. So we're looking for researchers, data scientists, local people who can work with city governments, who can help us gain intelligence and understanding of different solutions that are deployed. Yeah, we'd like to have as many people from Terra as possible.
Cool. Well, Jennie-Marie, you already gave a great introduction about yourself, your climate journey into Terra, and so I guess I can actually skip mine. And so, but I just want to,
do give us your background and your journey through Terra, because you've come out a community manager, which is great for all of us. It'd be lovely to hear, you know, where did you come from before Terra and how's your journey been?
Oh, okay. Sure, I'll keep it short because you are the, you know, and FPI is the focus today. But so hi, I'm Qing Wu, and I have just volunteered to become a community ambassador at Terra here since last month. So I was a fellow at LFA in the Pandas cohort, so which is actually exactly a year ago. I joined Terra as a fellow and going through whatever, you know, going through what you are through or have been through as well. And I really love this community, so I stay and kept in touch with people here, and eventually, yeah, hoping to also do something to give back to this community. So that's why I start this volunteering role. And so my background is in geophysics. I'm an academic geophysicist in training, and I taught in college for several years in Taiwan, where I'm originally from. And now I'm located in California, trying to also, as probably many of you do, trying to transition into a climate-focused, climate-related career, and hopefully leverage some of my, you know, earth science and geophysics background. But we'll see. I'm still in the transition. So yeah, maybe I can talk with you, Jennie-Marie, a little bit more about what you have been doing.
I can see Leanne and Sarah nodding their heads, and probably Jennifer off to the side nodding her head, and anybody else who's from FPI on the call that I can't see. So why don't I start off, just to give everybody a quick overview of what we're doing. Why don't I play our video, which we have created for the purpose of explaining our vision. And it has also been a process of solidifying our vision internally. So let me know if you can see the screen.
Have committed to reducing emissions.
Sorry, I've come in too late. There we go. There's always tech issues on a presentation, isn't there?
We're in a race against the clock to slow global warming, stable at 1.5, and avoid the devastating consequences of climate change. Governments, industry, and financial institutions have committed to reducing emissions. They've all set their target dates for net zero. But what practical action is taking place? Can it all be done in time? Will it be enough? We don't lack the global environmental data or the knowledge of the complex problems we face. We already have all the solutions needed to address these problems. The solutions are isolated in silos around the world. We're not learning and repeating each other's clever work. The lessons learned by these solutions must be shared, measured, and scaled. And quickly, we have 8 years left before the clock runs out and we miss our chance. We know where we need to go. We have our true north. We have all the tools we need to get there. What we urgently need is a map to guide us along the path to a sustainable and just future for all, people and planet. We need a global planetary intelligence system. We call it the Climate Pi. The Climate Pi is a shared platform that hosts hundreds of technology, social, and nature-based climate solutions that are already in operation somewhere on Earth. It calculates the real, on-the-ground impact of all of these solutions. The Climate Pi tells us what's working, what's not, and most importantly, where else high-impact solutions need to be scaled around the world. It will tell us the projected impact these solutions will have.
That was me pushing buttons.
Global scale. It speeds up progress by helping us collectively map the path to sustainability. The Climate Pi will be a central point of truth for climate progress intelligence. It will harness knowledge from all of the existing authoritative data sources on human wellness, weather, air, land, water, biodiversity, energy, and waste to create a shared planetary intelligence and recommend which solutions or best practices are right for each special place on Earth. The Climate Pi is a planetary intelligence decision-making platform. It shows us the path we must take for a sustainable future, showing which solutions we need and where to have real, demonstrable impact. If we come together and follow the Climate Pi's course, we will have a chance to reach our climate targets and ultimately save our planet. To find out more about the Foundation for Planetary Intelligence and the global shared resource that is the Climate Pi, go to fpi.earth.
So whenever we play that video, I always want to say what we meant to say was planet Earth will be just fine if we leave it alone. This isn't about saving the planet. This is about changing our course for humanity to continue to be able to live in a just and hospitable environment. So we would go back and change that one last thing. Sarah's posted the video in the chat for anybody who'd like to look at that again. So this has been a long journey for us to understand how we're actually going to go about, mapping the path to sustainability and what does that really mean? So I'm just going to share my screen here for a deck that I've put together for the purpose today to walk you through really what the thinking has been behind this, what our theory of change is, and how we're approaching the challenges of what does that mean, mapping the path to sustainability. So let me just put this in slideshow mode. Okay, can everybody see that? Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Great,
I
thank
can.
you, Lee. Okay. So this mission is about scaling climate solutions. So we already know what our goals are. As we said in the video, we know what True North is. True North is net zero emissions. True North is a sustainable future for people and planet. But we feel that the 2050 goals that were outlined by COP and by the IPCC and then revised to 2030, we think 2030 is a much more workable target, because if we haven't made the significant changes and if we don't peak in emissions and begin to see drawdown, then we are not going to make it. So attempting to stay under 1.5 degrees Celsius is, it's a little scary to think that we are at nearly 1.25 at the moment. And I think that we're now at 420 parts per million, and the safe space was 350. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read the book, Ministry for the Future, but I've only just begun it. It's mapping out what the future will actually look like. And it's only a few years from now. I think it's 3 to 5 years away. And they have reached something like 480 parts per million, and the world is beginning to crumble. So it's really, this is really race against the clock time that we all need to work together on this. But fortunately, so many big changes are happening. We're seeing Finland, who've just entered into law that they will reach net zero by 2035, I think. A lot of countries are coming on board with laws that enforce the changes that need to happen so that they can reach net zero by 2050. So many changes are happening. The best example that I've seen recently is the country of Wales, that actually has a commissioner for future generations, because the word sustainability has kind of lost its punch. People don't really know what that means. How do you define that? Even the French version, which is développement durable, what does that mean? Sustainable development. So the idea of making changes for future generations is something that really makes a lot more sense, but we're in a bit of a panic. So again, we already know what our goals are. Sorry, there we go. Yeah. And it's a major challenge, this business of scaling solutions, because as Project Drawdown has said, we have all the solutions that we need. The challenge now is just to scale them. But if you notice, you've been reading, you've been watching, you've been studying, there is no map to that true north, to that sustainable future. There's no action plan. There is no plan of where the solutions go, in which order, in which suite, what impact they'll have, what it will cost, and the actual order that everything needs to go in. So this is the mission of the climate pie of the Foundation for Planetary Intelligence, is to create that map. And in doing so, this is all about crowdsourcing all of the clever things that are already happening on the ground and understanding where those things need to be scaling. So the challenge number one is, how do you prioritize which solutions to scale? So we're attempting to apply at all times the 80-20 rule, the 20% of solutions which will have the 80% impact. And how do you choose those solutions? Which ones will have the highest impact? Thank you to Drawdown, we have much of that already researched and mapped out. Which solutions are going to be the most feasible to scale? Which ones work in tandem? Which suite of solutions works together for accelerated impact? And what are the specific enabling conditions that need to be in place? Governance, land tenure, public policies, socioeconomic factors, people's attitudes towards change. One of the most interesting examples that I have in recent memory was before the crisis and war in the Ukraine. There was already a moment where there was an energy crisis and the impact of prices going up. Emmanuel Macron, in his first presidential tendency, changed the prices of diesel fuel to try and discourage driving. And what actually happened was the population broke out into protest, and it was near civil war, because what he didn't work out was that 60% of the French population are actually earning minimum wage or less. And most of them live in rural areas because it's cheaper to live. And most of them drive diesel cars because they're cheaper to live and there's no public transport. So what he was in fact doing is penalizing the poor in hopes that he would have some kind of climate impact, and realized that, you know, that solution didn't work at all. It wasn't a solution at all. So solutions have to be acceptable for the people to say, yes, yes, I'll do that. It needs to either improve or not change their existing life. So fortunately, we already know where all the emissions are coming from. We know it's electricity production, food, agriculture and land use, industry, transport, buildings, and the 10% of other. But this is important because the public doesn't really understand where the sources come from. And for example, the big hoopla about don't fly, you know, don't do commercial air travel, that only represents like 1 to 2% of emissions. And everybody must switch to EVs. Again, if the whole world switched to EVs, that would only be 5% of emissions. So going back to the 80-20 rule, we need to be choosing solutions that address the largest portions first. And it's not about money making, which is unfortunately where, you know, the electric vehicles, that's where it's gaining the momentum, but it's not going to address the primary sources. We also know that unfortunately only about 40% of emissions can be drawn down by natural sources. So the 59% remains in the atmosphere and must be drawn down either by carbon capture or by changes to the way we actually produce them. Changes to industry, changes the way we farm, you know, changes to the way we move people around in cities. And another big factor in the 80-20 rule is that 73% of world emissions come from cities, and 80% of all emissions come from the global north. So we use this prioritization to understand you need to focus first on cities in the global north if we're going to have the highest impact. Just a disclaimer, we use Drawdown's research for most of what we do. Thank goodness for Drawdown, having shown the world, you know, the top climate solutions to reduce climate change, and with all of the impact measurement already done. So we know the costs and we know the impact measurement of these solutions at scale. What we don't know is what happens on the ground and how do you get to that place of scale. Fortunately, they've broken down their solutions into the different buckets of emission sources, which is wonderful. So Drawdown really is the greatest source. And we sometimes say that Drawdown is the genesis of the climate pie, because they already did all the research on the solutions that we need to deploy. And now we want to take the mantle forward and help to scale those solutions. So thank you, Drawdown. And you've probably seen their immense list of solutions. Some of them are so simple, like feeding cows seaweed to reduce their methane emissions by 90%. And I can tell you, Lainey, head of the farm school at Terra, she actually witnessed one of these tests happening, and it does actually work. So challenge number 2 is categorizing microclimates. How do you determine the right location fit for each solution suite? So if cows emit, you know, an enormous portion of the methane emissions, where's the density of cows? Where's the density of meat consumption? And looking at that system would be part of the 80-20 rule. What are some of the physical factors that need to be in place for these solutions to work? You know, if you're talking about solar energy, will there be enough sun? In fact, it can't be in the places where it's too much sun, because it doesn't work either. So physical climate factors matter a lot for deployability of solutions. And socioeconomic factors matter immensely as well, just like the example with Emmanuel Macron, where in fact, unfortunately, it did not work because he failed to look at the socioeconomic factors of his own country. And then again, going back to emissions priority, how can we have the highest impact with the fewest amount of deployments? So we also already know how to measure the planet's health. Thank goodness for the Stockholm Resilience Center and Johan Rockstrom, who defined the climate's 9 planetary boundaries. It's the instrument panel that lets us know the planet's health. And if you haven't already seen the documentary on Netflix, you must see it. It's a see it 3 or 4 times number. And the book is a tearjerker. I'm thinking of when I read it and I started to do the math on how old my children would be at the point where we've gone too far with our emissions. So this is a really, really important and globally recognizable. This is something that we can trust. This is peer-reviewed scientific study. We can trust the 9 planetary boundaries to tell us where we're going over. And sadly, we've already surpassed in 3 of those areas: biodiversity loss with land use change, the atmospheric aerosol loading, and chemical pollution. And chemical pollution is going to be one of the toughest of all, because about 30% of the world's land is actually already desertified. And all of the world's major rivers are polluted. And air pollution is causing asthma. It's everywhere. We have created such an unbelievable mess. But at least we have the measurement tools to look at this. And all of this macro data is available to us. This is just a small list of the sources of macro data that we want to be sourcing to be able to measure impact. But this is data that is readily available via API. We can plug in and get the data to, what is the CO2 count in the atmosphere based on even, as near as like a 5-meter radius. And all of this data is continuing to build and to build and to build. So we're going to be able to have visibility on where the problems are. And our goal is, of course, to identify the local problems in a specific area, so that we'll be able to diagnose what's the right suite of solutions for that individual spot. This data, air pollution map, Earth's desertification map, freshwater scarcity in risk areas. Fortunately, this is all reported from trusted sources. And more sources are coming online. Microsoft has come out with a Microsoft Earth source of data. Big players are looking to contribute to this problem in the best way that they can. So again, to scale climate solutions, where on the planet should the solutions go? Which solutions will work well together? What are the factors present that will make these solutions feasible? What do you need in place to deploy? How do you measure and predict impact? And above all, who's going to pay for it? But the good news is there is so much private and public wealth ready to take part in this challenge. And particularly, we look to the private wealth, the Giving Pledge, the Bezos Earth Fund, the XPrize, which is the 100 million that Elon Musk will donate to the carbon capture solution that has the best promise. We're very, very fortunate. We're actually pitching the XPrize next week. So there are so many incentives to come up with moonshot solutions or earthshot solutions to the climate crisis. And people are understanding this is about collaboration, and there is no time left for competition. So if anybody's producing something that you need better, it's about partnerships rather than trying to build something competitively. So again, in choosing how and what to scale in climate solutions, the SDG goals are great, and they identify a mix of human and planetary ills that must be fixed. But we looked through these at length, and it's a little complex to try and address every single one of them. So we've really been doing as much exercise and research on how do we boil this down so that we're able to prioritize what to scale and where, because a lot of research is available on each of these factors, and they've broken down which SDGs apply to each of the different challenges, the human and the land, but we find it a little bit too spurious and hard to measure. So we've looked at, again, going back to the Macron in France challenge, he did not understand that you have to take care of humans' basic needs first if you're going to have a hope of deploying a solution. So this is based on the original Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we have actually reworked it some to be more modern fit. And everybody on the planet, when we say sustainable future for people and planet, we mean all people. And that's about access to food, water, health, energy, and housing. And those are basic needs that must be met. And again, going back to the Welsh example of how to do things right, they're also beginning a pilot test of universal basic income to see what happens. How does the math work out when in fact we pay for people to have all their basic resources met? Because as it turns out, in trying to measure what does wellness look like for humans, a good measurement stick of wellness is actually infant mortality rate, or the Human Development Index, which is a combination of income per capita, expected years of education, and expected years at birth. And this actually comes down to poverty. 35% of, to say it more simply, poverty is actually 35% of the reason for early death, because it's insecurity of income, and that means poverty that causes early death. So this is a very, very good measurement stick, is making sure that humans have all their basic needs met. And then we have the most perfect model of all, which combines the UN SDGs and the 9 planetary boundaries, and looks at a safe and livable space, the donut economy. Kate Rayworth's brilliant model that in fact was posted up during the Paris Accord negotiations. They posted it up on the whiteboard for them all to look at, that their decisions had to fit within the donut economy. And it means that humans have all their basic needs met, and they are living within the boundaries of the planet's ability to stay healthy. So the donut economy is actually the ultimate goal for all climate solutions deployment for our sustainable future, is living within the donut economy. And fortunately, many cities are signing on to deploy the donut economy. So we're looking to create as many partnerships as possible to understand how they do that. How does it work? How do they measure success? What solutions are they deploying to get there? So here's our theory of change when we say mapping the path to a sustainable future for people and planet. We intend to observe and learn which combinations of solutions work in each location on Earth, and that will be done through partnerships with solution providers who actually see what's happening in their deployments. They're gathering data on how it's working, what means success, and locations. And locations are cities, are farms, are countries, are just a piece of land on the planet, a piece of geography where you're measuring the planetary health signals and you're measuring people's wellness, and is it working, and are emissions coming down? And then we need to prioritize the order of deployments of suites that are having the maximum drawdown impact. So first observe which suites are having the maximum drawdown impact, and then create a prioritization list by maximum impact first and onwards down that path. And this will be done through the data. The macro data that we talked about, which gives us the planetary health signals, and the micro data on the ground, which we are getting from our partners, from cities, from countries, from properties, from farms, local on-the-ground IoT data. And that data can come in the form of energy consumption, can come in the form of water quality indicators, water efficiency indicators, renewable energy deployments, air quality, waste efficiency, treatment of waste efficiency, circular economy deployed. And once we've identified the different microclimates and the different suites of solutions that work in those microclimates, then it's time to find the lookalike microclimates that match the locations of the prioritized suite of solutions. So for example, if Amsterdam has deployed the donut economy and Amsterdam has demonstrated that within a year's time, solutions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 working together have brought down X amount of emissions, then we need to find all of the other microclimates, in this case, cities that look like Amsterdam. And perhaps that's Copenhagen, perhaps that's Dublin. We'll find out, but it's all about understanding the different factors present that would help you understand what is that microclimate. Is it population size? Is it socioeconomic factors? Is it wealth of state? Is it attitude towards climate solutions? Is it presence of public transport? We're going to learn all of this through observation. And that's the beauty of data and data science, because the machines will, all the solutions and answers lie in the data. So it's just about observing. And this is where the machine learning and AI comes into place, is to understand what were those factors that made it work. Because the complexity of all of this is just too big for the human mind to conceive of. Things that we take for granted. Oh, well, of course, you must bribe local officials to make that work. We wouldn't think to actually mention that. To us, that's a known. And to a machine, it would be a known unknown. So all the solutions lie in the data. And how do we define microclimates? This is still a work in progress, we have to say. So we've tried to break them down by countries, by cities, by towns and villages, because no two cities are alike. We're going to have to understand what are the most common factors to be able to determine how many microclimates exist on the planet. There could be thousands. We hope not. Perhaps there are hundreds, but we already know that there are 52 microclimates determined by physical factors, weather, location, but there are many other factors that will help to determine a microclimate when it comes to deploying climate solutions. And we must also be looking at towns and villages. You can't just go for the big cities, because there are, large populations that matter, that can teach us solutions that are working. Like the Wales example, that's a tiny, tiny little country who are doing amazing big things. Or Costa Rica was the very first country to actually reverse deforestation and reforest. So there are big solutions that are happening in little places that we need to be learning about. And with those local government access, then you gain access to some of the important natural resources, rivers and lakes, forests and agriculture. And what we expect to be learning is that government regulation and policy has a lot to do with success of solutions, and that in itself is a major solution. So when we're looking at climate solutions and trying to uncover the solutions that cover multiple problems, or that are multiple solutions in one, what we're looking for is something like this example. So we came across this example through Terra, actually, and it's a little company called Carbon for Good. And Carbon for Good has a goal to solve inequality and climate change in one move, by turning African farms and rangelands into technology-powered carbon capture and storage facilities. But what they're doing at the same time is eradicating poverty and protecting crops, which means better yields, which means more people eat, and there's revenue for farmers. So in that solution are multiple solutions addressing multiple problems. So we need to be uncovering as many of these as possible. How it works is they plant a seed and they keep the sapling in one of their many nurseries in Kenya and Burkina Faso, and the little sapling grows, and then they distribute those saplings around to the different farms, and it's all registered through blockchain. And this is what makes this a perfect solution for us as well, is because it's all data driven. Everything is recorded. And then that tree is monitored over the course of its life, and it's capturing carbon. And the trees that they're choosing are optimized for carbon capture. And they live about 15 years. And at the end of that, and the reporting and payment enables them to pay the farmers for taking care of those. And they're able to actually monitor and understand how much CO2 is captured. And it locks in the carbon much more effectively, this particular tree. And after its lifespan of about 15 years, then they turn it into biochar and spread it across the fields. So the carbon is permanently locked in the soil. And they're having an amazing, amazing scale, this little company. They've planted almost 800,000 trees. And this is the big reason it's working so well, is because it's got the two sides. It's paying farmers in Africa. So it's dealing with poverty. It's dealing with desertified land. And it's enabling companies to actually accelerate their carbon offsetting, because that's going to be, sadly, one of the only ways that companies are going to be able to meet their net zero targets that they're all putting for 2030 or 2050. None of them are going to get there without carbon credits, which is unfortunate, but it is the state of things. And they've managed to scale this because of technology. So this is an AI-driven little app that works on the phone, and it monitors for disease. You can actually, with image recognition, you can see when there's disease in the crops. And this, again, is where we get to collect data. And that's why this type of solution is one of the best for us to be working with. And clearly, this is a much needed solution. And the reason this is working so well is because the employees of this little company are all students, are all local students. And so for $15 a day, these local science students are able to earn a living, and it's a completely circular economy that brings wealth to the local population, that gives jobs. It's really just the best thing we found. And then challenge number 3, how do we measure the impact of the solutions deployed at the micro level? So we needed to create some kind of tool that would be able to access the micro level impact data. And so we've created a dashboard, a very simple online access dashboard, where cities or change makers or investors in climate solutions, anybody who wants to demonstrate how a suite of solutions are working together, can actually collect the data and feed it into this dashboard. So let's use an example of the city of LA, who's quite interested in this. The city of LA has their own specific goals for the city. They have, I think, something like 6,000 oil and gas wells that they want to bring offline by 2050, or no, within the coming 20 years, which they know is way too long, because those oil and gas wells are causing pollution, air pollution, and they're all in disadvantaged areas. So in this case, they would switch one of these buckets to bring oil and gas wells down. And they want to be monitoring the air quality because of the pollution from the oil and gas wells. So they would switch this bucket to air quality. And they want to make sure that the food is coming from locally sourced farmers. And so they would use the food, and they want to see how quickly they're able to switch from fossil fuel to renewable energy, so they can monitor that this way. And this gives them a snapshot of all of the climate solutions that they have deployed. And this intelligence, we're able to gather information to teach the system, the Planetary Intelligence system, to teach it how does a city that was based on the oil and gas industry, how do they transition out of that? How do they transition the workers? How do they transition the systems? And how do they transition the entire city to a sustainable future for all? So that lesson, the pie, learning the lesson of how LA transitioned, would enable the pie to then take that intelligence. What was the suite of solutions they used? How long did it take? What was the data that we had to collect? How much did it cost? What were their challenges? Then we can identify lookalike cities to LA, for example, Dallas, or another example could be Calgary, cities, or Oslo, cities that were built on oil and gas revenues, because it's one of the most difficult transitions that will have to happen is how do people move from that industry towards renewable energy. So learning those lessons on the ground will be key to feeding the climate pie's intelligence so that it can recommend that suite of solution to cities that are lookalikes. So what are success factors in these suites of solutions and observing on the ground? We need to understand, is it repeatable? We need to understand what is the climate context. We need to understand what partnerships have to be in place to make it happen. And we need to understand and to identify the needs of the transition. So in the case of LA, they need to reduce air pollution. They need to transition these oil and gas wells. And then there has to be the demand and supply balance. There has to be an understanding of the people, of the population, of what the transition goals are, and a readiness for them to actually participate in. And a readiness means their needs continue to be met, their lives do not change unless it is for the better, because if you change it for the worse, it's not working. We're looking at the example in London. And the mayor, Sadiq Khan, who has made an enormous amount of changes to the city in order to reduce emissions, he's moved a lot of the traffic to other spots and not allowing them to go through thoroughways. And he's finding that, in fact, it's just creating pollution in other areas. So the solutions that he's attempting to deploy are, in fact, not having the desired benefit, and the people are suffering for it. So there's a lot of lessons that we need to study and absorb into the intelligence of the climate pie. Moving on. So again, we want to identify all of these microclimates around the Earth so that we can figure out what their lookalike climates are and then begin to map the path of scaling. So in the LA example, we find the lookalikes to LA, we identify them all, and then you can measure and predict what the scaling map would look like. Let's say there are 50 other cities that look like that, and the cost of deployment in LA was X, and therefore the cost of deployment to the other 50 cities would be Y, and the time that would be necessary, and the impact, most importantly, on carbon drawdown would actually be able to be mapped, and that's mapping the path to sustainability. So we are looking at a number of different climate contexts to begin this testing. And we're in the very, very beginning phases of discussions with the local authorities, and they've each got different lessons to teach. So we've got a spot in Paris in France, and their challenges are the population. There's a lot of gang wars, there's drugs, there's violence, there's insecurity. And at the same time, it's a commuter path to Paris. So they've got their own challenges. And then we've got a small little town in France, and their challenges are agriculture. And this is a 50,000 population town. And so agriculture is another lesson that needs to be learned so that it can be transferred to all of the other cities, small cities, agricultural areas that rely on that industry. A city in Germany that actually is incredibly ambitious in climate change solutions. So they've already set their targets, they've already set their goals, they've already identified their solutions. So this is a very important type of climate to be studying, because they're going to teach us how this works much faster than any other. And then again, we want to look at LA, and Sudbury would be a very interesting town to look at that we begin discussions with. Sudbury is a mining town. So much like transitioning from oil and gas, transitioning from mining or finding a way to do sustainable mining, which I have some skepticism around, but that would be a lesson that would be incredibly important to absorb into the climate pie's intelligence. And Sarah-Louise, who is on the call, our co-founder, Sarah and I, our previous business, Alchemy AI, had a massive project, still has a massive project in India with the Indian government, looking at how to rejuvenate the Ganges River. And the Ganges River, as you know, is incredibly polluted, and they want to be able to test scenarios and investments in climate solutions. So looking at if they deployed 10 waste management machines along the river, how would that impact the health of the water, the toxicity of the water, the marine biolife, the health of the population nearby. So that's what data and data analytics and decision platforms can help with. We're also working towards a local study of Luxor in Egypt. And Luxor's challenges are dealing with waste, dealing with desertified land, dealing with poverty. And so there's a whole, you can name probably at least 10 lookalike areas to Luxor, Egypt, that would benefit from figuring out how to transition that population. And Lagos, Nigeria. Now, Nigerians' population is set to go to something like 400 million in the next 20 years. And the attention to waste is zero, and poverty is out of control. And there's going to be a lot of these mega cities that are experiencing extreme climate change already that we need to be able to help and study. And the Aguaduna project in Brazil is a very, very interesting study because it's a city that's being built from zero. And their goal is to build a sustainable city. So it'd be extremely interesting to learn, what does that mean? What is a sustainable city? How do you start from scratch deploying 100% renewable energy? How do you employ people 100%? How do you do a sustainable city? So this is another study that we are getting set to do. And a final study that we've identified and begun discussions is the Javari tribe in Brazil. It's an occupied indigenous land space, which is approximately the size of Portugal. And they're struggling with illegal mining, illegal fishing, and illegal deforestation. And the purpose of this project, which is actually our partner Celine Cousteau, who is the granddaughter of Jacques, the study's purpose is to understand and uncover indigenous people's lessons, because 4% of the world's population, the indigenous people, are the guardians of 80% of its biodiversity, which means that understanding indigenous peoples dealing with land is part of our 80-20 rule. We need to understand what are they doing to preserve that land. I'm coming close to the end of my hour, so I might have to hop through things, but challenge number 3 is, of course, the potential to test and develop pathways to scale in different contexts and the potential partners to include. We recognize the complexity of this mission. So this is a very, very brief first sketch of what the climate pie is going to look like. And we've built it specifically to demonstrate at COP what happens when you zero in on Luxor, Egypt, and how do you diagnose the present challenges, the climate change problems that they have. And so we've got the high level planetary indicators here. And this is NASA's list of planet, the key planet signals. And of course, we're failing on all of them, as you can see. And this is the measurement, and this is just arbitrary. This is just a sketch. This is not the actual real system. It's just for the purpose of this presentation. Is the carbon count drawdown that can be measured with the solutions that have been deployed. So the decision flow of this is from the global map. You choose a location, you present the candidate problems, you choose a problem set plus any associated configuration, because the configuration means that we're going to need to read the data and present the ranked solutions that we would recommend. So in the case of Luxor, if their challenges are with agricultural yield, and their challenges are, water scarcity, and their challenges are polluted Nile River, we might recommend solutions such as waste transformation, which would create jobs on the ground, which would create resources, which would clean up the river, and so on and so forth. So that's a blended suite of solutions that we would recommend. And so the PI's ultimate goal is to diagnose solutions on the ground and recommend best fit suite of solutions, and then measure the impact of those solutions. So I'm going to not go through all of the rest of my slides, and I welcome you to come back to us for, this is the process of the PI, because I want to make sure that I can open up the floor just for at least a few questions that might come from the audience. Should I stop my share now? There we go. And thank you all for generously sitting through the very first time that we go through this deck and talk about this publicly, because it's still very much a work in progress, and we're still very much at testing and building POC stage.
Cool. Thank you, Jennie-Marie, for having us as your first audience of this deck. So I see some hands raised already, so I'll call them in order. So I guess I actually don't know the order, but Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much for that. A stunning amount of detail and depth in the work. So thanks for explaining it. I would just like to ask, I mean, I'm a councillor in Buckinghamshire in the UK. So we are exactly the sort of people that would be using it. I'm also a councillor at a lower level as well in a parish area. And it's the description of it, obviously, when you talk about the backside of it, the back part of it is vast. But when it comes down to the use that we might put it to, say, for instance, in Buckinghamshire, and it's quite funny that we're having this talk today because we got approached yesterday by somebody trying to get us to use something else, which is sort of like this, but probably not as well thought through in any way. Is what we need is utter simplicity. So first thing is that to get any of the officers to use anything, it's got to be blindingly simple, because otherwise they won't use it. From the councillor's point of view, it's got to be blindingly simple, because otherwise they won't understand it, which is a different issue. And then I think the other thing that worries me when I look at it as somebody who is hopefully after the Terra course even better informed, but already fairly informed on what's going on in climate, is that the biggest challenge that's facing us on the planet is not the 100 different derivations of the SDGs. It's the fact we've got to keep global heating down. And if we don't do that, every single one of the SDGs gets worse. And so have you built into it, and I probably haven't if this is the first presentation, but are you thinking about focusing in on that absolutely critical issue, which is keeping down global heating, and then effectively decarbonization and linked with that? Sorry, that's a lot, say 3 questions in one.
Well, thank you so very much for that question. And FPI people on the call, please take down your, Ed's contact information, because we'd love to follow up and answer some of those questions in more detail. But the simplicity, we've recognized that immensely, because our first studies, the Paris mayor is an ex-cybersecurity guy. So he's an expert technology guy. So that's okay that it's complicated. But the second in Sadirak is an older gentleman who's really a farmer, and he doesn't even know how to text message. So his, it has to be incredibly simple, or it will not work and will not be used and is a complete waste of everybody's time. So yes, we recognize that. And 2, the ultimate goal of this is to understand which combination of solutions will reduce emissions, because everything else is really important, but not if we don't reduce emissions, because life will just get infinitely worse. So this is all about that one priority, and everything falls, cascades down from there. But it is, and you'll see on the dashboard, it's the drawdown count. That's the big number, is the ticker. How are you doing? Are you drawing anything down? So yes to that. And I've forgotten what the third question is.
I've Probably, that's fine. I think you probably covered it as you went
It's
through, but that's
recorded,
great.
so we can go back.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next questions.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I have two quick questions. One, you talked about solutions with governance and the conditions that need to be in place. I was wondering if you have tools that aren't necessarily a climate solution, but tools to help these different actors and communities communicate and coordinate their efforts, because that can be kind of a big choke point in some of this stuff. Just a quick second question was, the dashboard is really cool. Do you have any way to make it publicly available for like constituents, so they can kind of hold their representatives to account? Just something like that, so it's a little more public facing for that.
Yes, so actually we've been learning a lot about this in conversations with local authorities and change makers, shall we call them, generally speaking, is the need for the public, people, to be able to see what's happening. And that was the LA example, is that they really know what they need to do and they really know what the solutions are, but the public questions whether or not anything is working. And the public questions in London, whether or not the big changes the mayor has made, are those actually working? Or is it greenwashing? Or are you just making our lives miserable? So that sort of that communication, that transparency is in demand. So we need to find a way that we can make this visible publicly. And we haven't yet, of course, identified how specifically we're going to do that, because the pie will be open to all. You can search and see what solutions would be right, but the local city dashboard where the intelligence is coming from, that won't be publicly available, except unless the local authority has, there has to be some definition around the visibility of that. Maybe there's a login for local people. Maybe there's a site that's dedicated to the city, that's branded to the city, so that the communication can be, you can tell where it's coming from. Does that answer your question? I hope it's a yes, is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah.
We'd love to actually talk with you some more so that we can help, so we can understand better what you mean with that and how we can build that in, because we are just literally in the long road till 2030. We're right here. So we'd like to learn, what is needed.
Phil.
Next question.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I had two questions. One is, I'm really intrigued by your idea of microclimates of kind of lookalike cities, but I wonder what that sort of timeline will look like. I mean, you're in there, you're prioritizing with them, they're rolling out a plan, and I suspect a number of months goes by before they can measure anything. Is that when you have something that then you can take to another city and say, hey, look what these guys did? So I wanted to see, or is there a way to kind of parallelize or move a little faster on that? And secondly, this is more of an observation. I've worked with local cities somewhat in my solar days, and I wonder if you've how are you going to reach out to them? Like, are you going to have a sales force who's used to selling stuff to cities? Because obviously it's not always easy to just walk in the door and sell something to a city. You need a lot of local connections. Particularly if you're going into a non-Western country or something like that.
Yeah. You asked all the hardest and most important questions, and it's what the people internally challenge. We challenge ourselves constantly. So the scaling to different cities, we could never just be the little dudes that knock on the door. It's going to have to be partnerships, and there are authorities. There's a woman that Terra had on who has smart city deployments for like 10 cities in China. We want to talk to her. There is an association in Germany with one of our partnerships who have the 100 cities that want to be sustainable. We need to talk to them. The donut economy team are reaching out to, we want to talk to them. And, the Cool Cities group, we need to talk to them. So what we need is a really, really effective channel management strategy, because there's no way that we can knock on all the doors, and cities are super slow to move. So what we'd like to do is to start to learn the good lessons, the things that are working, like donut economy, like Cool Cities, like the P40, I think the C40, and learn from the lessons of what's already working, so that we can start picking that up. And we'll do the work of identifying the lookalike climates. but we're going to need help figuring out how to access all the local cities. So, and it's not just cities, right? It's industrial farming, it's location. So it's one of the big gnarly challenges that we're grappling with. So if you'd like to, help us with thinking and on that, we would love to hear. Thank you for that question.
I'd love to talk more about.
Yeah.
I guess if you already have stories that have happened in the past that you could run the data on, I wonder if you can accelerate the process. Hey, here's something that's already worked, and even though you weren't there at the very beginning, you've done the data.
Yeah, exactly.
Hannah.
Cool. I know we're at time, so I'll keep this quick. So I know you mentioned one of your projects you're running on, they're uploading data to a blockchain, and that allows for transparency of data. For your other projects, are you also exploring how you might work with kind of the Web3 or even the crypto regenerative finance space for either funding or just transparency of data, or is that more like project by project?
I mean, best case scenario, that would be the core source. I mean, blockchain is the right place for all data to be, this is a distributed system, right? And we need to have, and actually, I don't know if you've heard of Versus, but right. So there is an element of the Web 3.0 or whatever it's being called. There is an element of that will be extremely helpful. And the concept of digital twins is something that we really have, since the very beginning, thought this is going to help us a lot, is the digital twin modeling. And the spatial web is another thing that is going to be really, really helpful. So yes, I think we're going to need that to scale. And most of us come from IT, that's our background. We don't come from climate. We just thought, this is like the greatest challenge humanity's ever faced. What industry knows best how to scale? It's IT, right? Yes, IT knows how to blitz scale. So that's why, most of the solutions lie in data, in crowdsourcing data, in, the network of networks.
Yeah. And so I know you said you were in the testing phase right now. Is there like a beta that we could look at?
Not yet, but we're getting a demo of the first version tomorrow. Like you just saw screenshots of it. So we're very, very, very excited to see what it comes, what it looks like tomorrow. And so we will, if I don't know if this is something that maybe we want to start with Terra, is a community of people that want to look at, contribute to, think about, help test, help submit data. This has got to be really a crowdsourced effort.
Yeah. Thank you.
So please.
Yeah. Sorry, Jennie-Marie, would you be able to stay maybe for another 5 minutes, just in case?
I can, until the kids start squealing and make me cook them dinner. Yes, I can.
Cool. Yeah, so we have maybe 5 minutes. So if anyone has other burning questions, can jump in. Yeah. And if you are thinking for your next question, so I will actually keep the chat record and I will save them, and then I will post them in the Terra Slack data science channel. So if you haven't been in that channel, please just join the channel so you can get access to the chat, because there are some people sharing some really nice thoughts and resources. I don't want to lose them after the call, so I'll save them and for you to refer to after the event. And also the recording will be posted there in the data science channel. All right, cool. Gautam, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, Jenny, I just had a question. I put it up on the chat too. Just want to understand if private companies have really unique solutions, would they, democratize the solutions to everybody? And because I think we had a talk with Dr. Chip Fletcher, and he mentioned a company in Iceland which has a process with membranes that capture carbon, and and he said that they weren't ready to share their technology or any of that. So
is that?
Yeah, I think that's what I got from it.
Is that Climeworks?
I think it was. He said, and I mean, it was just a thought that, I mean, once a good solution's there, shouldn't everyone share it with everyone to get there faster than hold it back?
We absolutely believe so. And now that I've been able to move over in the little faces, I see that Andrea and Salvador are on the call as well. And in addition to Jennifer, and so they're busy looking at climate solutions that are out there. And I don't know, Salvador, you look like you might want to pop in. No, I guess not. You?
Hey everyone, sorry, my mic doesn't work on the earphones. I think we've been thinking about that a lot. And even though some companies don't want to share like the bulk of their technology or the bulk of their data, what we really need is just some kind of understanding of efficacy, how well the solution works. And once we get our hands upon that, so for Climeworks, maybe we don't need to know exactly how they're separating carbon dioxide from the air, but if we can know how many tons of CO2 they draw down in a day or in a month, and how much energy they use to do that, etc., then we can have enough to understand the impact and recommend a solution.
Anything that you guys want to add to that? It's a challenge. I mean, we need to understand what the types of solutions are and the measurable impact, what's to be expected from their deployment. And then dealing with intellectual property is going to be a big barrier, as well as sovereignty of data. That's also going to be a challenge. But again, there really isn't time to play competition here. So if Climeworks can demonstrate, but they're quite open about their success and how it works and what it costs them. So I think that if we can, well, a solution like that can be deployed anywhere where there's land. That's all they need is land, because it's the same, CO2 in the atmosphere everywhere, right? So we can recommend Climeworks goes everywhere that empty land is, but it's still not efficient enough. Carbon capture is just not efficient enough. It costs too much, it goes too slow. And the concentrations make it, not a very, very efficient solution. We wouldn't put it in the 20 of the 80.
Ed?
Yeah, great. Two sort of other areas. I think one you did touch on a bit when you were talking. So, and the other one I don't think you did. Well, you did. You talked about Macron's failings on the one particular issue, but are you also going to be trying to crunch data on politics? So on the way countries are looking, and so effectively the application of all this stuff, and it doesn't really matter whether it's at a local council level or a national level, unless you've got the right politics in place, you're not going to get the right policies. And the second one is finance, and you did mention finance when you were talking, but I'm thinking now, for instance, about Finland getting there in 2035. To get there in 2035, you're going to have to create new financial instruments and ways of getting money into the right places to actually get things done. And you're going to have a financial system that can do it in order to achieve that. So are you also looking at flows of money and how that's being accessed?
To the political question, let's take that second, because I can see Andrea sort of hopping up and down because that's a big subject that she's studying for us. But in terms of financial instruments, fortunately, that industry is on the move and are putting together the instruments that will hopefully address that. So, I mean, the PFANs group that Mark Carney put together, bullying all the major financial institutions of the world, that they would have to get to 2050, net zero by 2050, including their entire portfolios. So that's on the move. And then there's that, the phantom 100 billion that's meant to go to the global south, that they're going to, it's going to be forced soon. But at the local level, and what we want to look at, because the impact investment community is just ramping up. And so we'd like to, when we have the resources and the people and the time to look at it, we'd like to have a channel of, the pipeline of solutions to invest in. So if we can identify the roadmap of scaling, I don't know, the seaweed for cows solution, and we say, and you must deploy it to all of these microclimates and you will have the following impact. And then we can put this out to tender and say, who'd like to pay for that? You know, this, the amount of private investment, private wealth that is feeding into climate and climate technology and innovation is just enormous. But I think that they don't know what impact means. They don't know where to spend their money, and they don't know how to prioritize where their money would be best put to use. And so we want to provide, with this road mapping of scaling climate solutions, we want to provide almost like a ticker list of what do you want to pay for? You know, do you want to pay for the cow stuff? Do you want to pay for the, you know, the global deployment of whatever solution scaling roadmap? We want to be able to provide that as a package with, this will be the impact, this will be the cost, this is the timeline, and you will be the savior of the world with this solution, and you will have that much impact. So there'll be a time when there's a screaming, you know, heated financial buzz around must fund. And what we'd like to do is be able to provide, you know, the ticker list of, here, you can put your money here or here, and this will be the actual impact. So that's a area to be developed, but one that we're incredibly excited about. And the political question, Andrea, do you want to address that?
Just a few comments on that side. There are two parts to address. One is that we need to understand what is the political situation in each city or location. It's not going to be the same telling the city of Amsterdam, which is already doing donut economy, to go more sustainable, as telling perhaps a city in Brazil where the politics are just not in place yet, or they are being constantly blocked. On the other side, we want to make use of the policies, regulations that are already in place and working. The same thing for solutions that people have already put in place. We don't want to double it. We don't want to duplicate. We want to use them, say, okay, this has worked here. They have introduced this regulation here. This will probably work in this place. And you can see the model they used, how they implemented it, the impact. So again, it's about gathering resources, things that have already worked in other places, or that monitoring how they are being, like how they are working right now, and then using that information to scale it up. I hope that answers your question. Otherwise, maybe the others can help.
Yeah, it definitely does for now. I have to say, I would actually quite enjoy digging into that in some more detail, actually. And there's, in the UK context, there's a number of organizations that are working on bits and pieces of that at the moment as well. But it would be interesting. And also because there's a lot of thinking on some of the things I'm working on, which are talking about how to get that action at the political level and how to copy and paste, like you're saying, from other things that are working. So it'd be interesting to dig into it a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be great to keep in touch.
And to get help, you know, if you can give us some guidance, we'll be very, very interested.
Yeah,
okay.
very happy to help if I can.
That'd be lovely. That'd be lovely. I don't know if we are, if we must give ourselves just boot now, but I will put in the chat my email address. You can find me on, obviously, on Terra, obviously, and in our group, the ones that I've seen, it's Jennifer Anderson, Sarah-Louise Penhall, Salvador Stewart is in there, Andrea Manrique-Gruss, and Leanne Hickman, of course. And have I forgotten anybody? But please do reach out to us, and we will be extremely happy to collaborate, learn from you, work with you, learn from what you're learning locally, get suggestions. We're in super building, super brainstorming mode. So happy for all contributions. I hear the children rumbling, so.
Stunning presentation.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to go back to my team and apologize for some of the goofy stuff that, you know, wasn't clear, but we'll give it, we'll do a better job next time.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. And so please reach out to Jennie-Marie. And also, if you want, maybe you can continue our conversation in the data science channel on Terra Slack as well. If you have some question, just pop it there, and we can organize to get to it. Or maybe you can arrange another huddle sometime with Jennie-Marie and her team together for like another brainstorming session. All right. But yeah, I want to respect everyone's time, and thank you so much for staying over time with Jennie-Marie and us. And So yeah, so have a good rest of the day or evening, and good luck with your XPrize pitch next week. Good luck.
Think of us.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your great questions, and I hope we capture that chat so that we can come back and discuss all. Hello, Morna. I'm seeing you now.
Yes, I will share. I will share the chat record with you and I will also post it on the channel so everyone can see it and comment and share. It's really great. There are some really great resources and thoughts there we haven't had time to get to. We really need to extend this event to like 2 hours. Just kidding. Yeah, I just want to
organizing this, Chinwoo, and we would love to do it again once we're a little bit more advanced, maybe some weeks, maybe some months, but we're very happy to stay within the warm place of Terra to discuss openly what we're trying to do here.
Great. And
thank you all so much.
Yeah, and keep us updated.
Yeah. Good job, Jennie-Marie. That's great. Yasmin, if you would reach out to me, we're definitely got to talk more.
Yes, sounds good. Definitely.
Thank you, Adam.
Bye, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Jinnu.